This is AP Calculus Self-Check 7.3 Solutions. All right, so we have Karen. I always want to say Kaylin when I'm reading this problem. Kaylin is riding her bicycle on a straight road home from school. Okay, find acceleration at 7.5. So at 7.5, that's about that position right there. So we know that acceleration is really going to be the slope of velocity. I'm writing this down, but you don't need it in the test. So slope of velocity means I'm looking for the slope here. So what is slope again? Slope is what? Do we remember? Rise over run, yeah. Change in y over change in x. It's the rise over run. So the rise over here was minus 0.1, minus 0.1. The change in x, I went right 1. So the slope here is negative 0.
How did you get that?
How did I get these numbers?
Yeah.
So you can see between 0.3 and 0.2 going down, I'm looking at this triangle from here to here for the slope. I went from 0.3 to 0.2, so I went down 0.1, that's the change in y.
Oh.
And I went right from here to here, and that's a change of 7 to 8, a change in 1.
But wouldn't that be like the slope of 8? I guess not.
That would be the slope at 7.5. Any point along this line in this interval between 7 and 8, not including 7 and 8, is a slope of negative 0.1. So that means I have a slope of negative 0.1, and it does say indicate units of measure, so this is going to be, where does it say? Miles per minute right here. So it's going to be miles per minute, and that is no, it's just velocity, or wait, you're right, miles per minute squared. That is a point. Get out your extra credit tracker.
Wait, so because this is a graph of velocity, then like position is, like the point on the graph is velocity, and then slope is acceleration.
So the slope is, yeah, exactly. All right, I'll come sign that after the video. Perfect. So, and then part B, using correct units, explain the meaning, and then find the value. So explaining the meaning, absolute value, what is that, girls?
Total distance traveled.
Beautiful, yep. So integral from 0 to 12 of velocity of t dt is the total distance traveled. Total distance
What about the
traveled.
absolute value sign in the BT/dt?
Oh yeah, forgot that. Thank you.
Point.
I'm gonna give you a point for this one. That's not really a math error.
Wait, so saying change in position miles from 0 minutes to 12 minutes is wrong.
Say that one more time.
Change in position.
Yeah, it's not change in position, because change in position would be without absolute value.
Okay.
So total distance traveled from, I guess technically, where are we in? We are in miles. In miles from 0 to 12 minutes. So from t equals 0 to t equals 12 minutes. So that's the explanation. The main thing to take away here is it's the total distance traveled. You have to have that, otherwise you won't get the point. And then it says actually find the value. So finding the value of the integral, remember integral is just the area between the curve and the x-axis, and since it's the absolute value, this negative area down here is going to be positive. All right, so I'm going to go through this slow at first and then fast at the end. So I need to find the area of this triangle, and I'm going to kind of do the shortcut method, which is the formula. So this is going to be base, which is 2 times height. Height is 0.2. 2 times 0.2 is 0.4, and then I have to half that. So 0.4, half of that is 0.2. All of this area of the triangle is 0.2. Look, this triangle is the same shape. All of our units are scaled the same. So this would be a negative 0.2, but it's absolute value, so it's another 0.2. And then I'm going to make this a triangle right here. This is going to be a distance of 1. And then I go up to 0.3, so this is going to be 0.3 times 1, which is 0.3, and then half of that, so 0.15. And then I have this rectangle here. This rectangle is 1 by 0.3, so that's 0.3. I'm going to do this triangle shape and then this rectangle shape. So I have a tiny triangle up here that's 1 by 0.1 and then half that. So that area down here is 0.05. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4 by 0.2, so that's 0.8 for that giant rectangle here. And this triangle over here is 0.1. So adding these all up, and you should get 1.8. So 0 to 12, vt, when I take the absolute value of every value for dt, that's going to equal 1.8. Don't forget our units. When we're taking the integral, we're going backwards from miles per minute to just miles. 1.8 miles. And before I move on, I want to tell you how to score yourself. So on part A, there's 2 points. You get 1 point if you got 0.01 or 0.1, sorry, negative 0.1, and another 1 point if you did miles per minute squared. For part B, you get 1 point if you say it's a total distance traveled plus 1, and 1.8 miles plus 1.
So far I have one.
Me too.
All right. On to part C. So part C, shortly after leaving home, she turned around to get it. At what time does she turn around to go back home? And we can see that is at this point right here because it is a change in velocity sign. So at t equals 2 minutes, or just t equals 2, that's fine too. Units aren't super important in this one. And the reason, it's because it's a it's a velocity sign change.
Do we have to say velocity?
You do.
Wait, is it okay if I said her velocity is negative? Or
That's
her,
what I
like,
said. Or I said her
And it can't just be
position.
negative, it has to be a velocity sign change. It has to be these keywords, sign change. So it's 1 point if you said at 2 minutes, or at 2, and 1 point if you said a velocity sign change.
So for some reason I did t equals 1 because like it looks like she's like retracting. I don't know.
So I think what's happening, if I were making up a story, is she's going really fast to school, or road home from school. So she's going away from school, and then she's like, oh shoot, I think I forgot something. And this is her slowing down as she's remembering, I forgot my textbook. And then she finally goes back and she turns around and goes faster and faster. And then she gets to school, gets her textbook, and then slows down and then starts coming back. So this period, she goes back to school to get her textbook, I think. That's what it said in the problem, right? Or her calculus homework. God, Kaylin, just remember it, please.
That's like
actually, that happened to me yesterday. I had to drive back to school because I left my notebook here.
Okay. On your bicycle, too?
Yeah.
No.
Wait. Oh.
Liar! Liar! All right. Let's talk about part D. Part D takes a little bit of time.
You want that?
So we're talking about this new dude named Larry who's also going home from school.
No.
So his velocity is modeled by this equation, which we can't use our calculator for. So we need to figure out who lives closer. So we need to look at position change. So position change for Larry. So I'm going to talk about Larry here.
Layer bear.
I need to do the integral between 0 and 12 because those are our bounds for Larry. And he's going to be this function, which is pi over 15 sine of pi over 12 t dt. This is the total position change for Larry. When we get this answer, we'll compare it to the total position change for Kaylin. Or Karen, depending on who your person is. All right, so how do we do the integral? Look, if I look at dinner, dinner doesn't work. Dinner is not 1. Do you remember what happens when we have dinner not equal to 1 for integral? Taxman, there it is.
So now we have to use Taxman.
So, yeah. So what is our inner? Our u is pi over 12t. What is our taxman?
Taxman is pi over 15 sine.
Pi over 15. I think sine is included in the function. So it's just the person knocking at the front of our trigonometric door. So pi over 15. And our derivative of u, or u prime, if you want to go faster, u prime.
Isn't it 12, not 15?
I think U is the 12.
Oh wait. Okay.
Yeah, so pi over 15 is knocking at the front door. And then u prime, and get rid of the t. This is just going to be pi over 12. And I need to set this giant thing as a fraction. Pi over 15 divided by pi over 12. And remember, if you can't remember how to do this, this is the trick. It's pi over 15 divided by pi over 12. Keep it, change it, flip it. Keep it, change it, flip it.
Oh god.
Pi's cancel out.
Oh, I don't know why I wrote a 15 down there.
Yeah, I was like, wait, whatever.
Pi's cancel out, and you're left with
12 over 15.
12 over 15, which simplifies to divide top and bottom by 3. 4 over 5. So we're going to pay the taxman with 4/5. So this is now going to turn into the integral between 0 and 12 of 4/5 sine of, and I'm just going to leave this as pi over 12t. It should be a u, but we're not using u substitution, dt. All right, so when we actually do our integral, when we go backwards of sine, what is that going to be? Is it a positive or a negative cosine?
Negative.
Positive. Negative.
Anti, same means change. So it's going to be a negative.
Same means change. Same means change. Wait, so why are we needing the anti? Because
We're taking the integral.
acceleration and we need its velocity.
We're looking for total position change. Total position change means integral. Total position change between 0 and 12 is the integral between 0 and 12. So it's going to be negative 4/5, and it's going to be cosine of pi over 12t, and that's going to be evaluated between 0 and 12. Now we have to remember.
Solve for this.
Now we have to solve for this, remembering our trig.
God.
Yeah. All right. So
Jesus.
when we plug in 12,
Oh, Lord Jesus.
we'll have negative 4/5 cosine of 12 pi over 12 is just pi. Okay, we'll evaluate that in a sec, but I'm going to subtract what happens when I sub in 0. It's going to be minus a negative 4/5 cosine of 0. All right, cosine of pi. If you don't remember, you can make a little chart. Cosine of pi, where does pi live? Left, top, right, bottom. Where's cosine? Where's pi? Top or left?
Left.
It's left. Pi is half of a circle. So cosine is the x or the y?
The X.
X. So the x position here is
Negative 1.
-1. So this cosine of pi evaluates to -1. -1 times -4/5 is a positive.
Or just, I meant to say positive.
Positive 4/5. All right, we're going to get rid of these double negatives. When negatives kiss, it makes a positive. So plus 4/5 times cosine of 0. Cosine of 0 lives left, top, right, bottom.
Right.
Right? Is it x or y?
X.
X position of that coordinate point is 1. 1 times negative 4/5 is just 4/5. 4/5 plus 4/5 is 8/5, which is about, well, it's exactly 1 point what?
It is.
It's 1 and 3/5.
Yep.
And 3/5 is what decimal? Multiply top and bottom by 2. 3/5 turns into 6/10.
So
0.6. All right, that was all the work for Larry.
Wait, do we have to change it into 1.6?
You will need to compare 8/5 to Kalen, and we haven't calculated Kalen. So if Kalen is like 9/7, then you will need decimal places. But we actually, I think you'll be able to see what's going on. That was only for Larry. So how do we find Kalen? We basically are done with Kalen. We already did the work back here in part B. The only difference now is instead of adding 0.2, we need to treat this as a negative.
So those two cancel out.
So we have to subtract how many from 1.8?
0.2.
Careful.
So they're the same.
Careful,
Negative
careful.
0.2.
We added a 0.2 already for the 0.8, so we really need to subtract 0.4. So if we come back here, this is going to be, we can say that Karen or Kalen is really 1.4. So who lives farther from school? That was this question. Who lives closer to school?
Karen.
Closer. The answer is
Karen.
Wait,
Karen.
I'm confused why you subtracted 0.4 instead of 0.2.
So if you add all of these up, what we really did is we want to subtract 0.2. Since we already added it, we have to subtract it twice
So
now.
then that would be, if you added it once, that would be canceling it, and then you have to like add it again.
Exactly,
Okay,
yep.
Yeah,
So-
you get
And 1.4 is less than 1.6, and since our distance is to the right, we're looking for the lower number. 1.4 is the answer, or Karen is really the answer. So we showed the work, we did that, good. So the answer is Karen lives closer.
What? We should like sing into it.
All right, how do we score part D? I'm looking at my scoring guide. So there are 2 points for Larry.
Same, bro.
So if you have the integral for Larry, so if you have this thing, 0 to 12 of pi over 15 sine pi over 12 t dt, all of that, if you just had the integral, that's plus 1. If you actually have the value of 1.6 or 8/5 down here, that's another plus 1. if you have, and then this is kind of a, you have to get both these in order to get your +1. If you have Karen's distance, that's needed, and the fact that Karen lives closer, all of that is +1. If you have both of them, 1.4 and that Karen lives closer, that's
So
+1.
if you just randomly guess like Karen,
Then you don't get the point because you didn't have 1.4.
What if I guessed 1.4?
If you guess 1.4 and guess that Karen lives closer, you would get the point.
if you found the answer differently.
Good thing I'm gonna.
If you found the answer a different way, I'm assuming that you did the work correct, then that's fine.
So the only difference between finding position change and finding total distance traveled is the total distance traveled is absolute value.
Exactly.
And the position, I can't. But
Yeah.
you know what it is.
All right, that concludes this video. We're going to get ready for self-check 7.4.